What's up, everybody? Good evening. Hope you guys are doing well today. And we're doing another one of these. I know I did one of these not that long ago. I know that I did another one of these not too long before that one. And I usually don't do these but once every couple of months. But sometimes you just play a lot of recently released games in a short period of time. And that has happened to me. So we have just so happened to have played another recent release on stream the whole thing over on Twitch, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Now, I'll say this. This game is available for free on Game Pass. If you have Game Pass, you can play this game. All you have to do is install it, as long as it runs on your machine or you have an Xbox or whatever. So, most people that would be interested in a game like this have probably already played this because it's so easy to do so. So it's not like this review will help very many people decide whether or not they want to purchase it when the game is already available for most people. Nevertheless, I played through it on stream. It's a new release. It just came out, not even a month ago, maybe about a month ago. And I have some thoughts about it. So let's go ahead and get them out there. I beat it a few days ago now, and I just didn't have time to get to a video review of it until now. So let's just go ahead and hit it, and let's talk about Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Now, I've never played an Indiana Jones video game before. I'm certainly familiar with the franchise. I think it's a pretty good franchise in terms of film. Not necessarily one of my all-time favorites. It's not something that I grew up with. It is something that I'm very I'm very aware of how intentionally schlocky it is, and that's okay. But when I compare it to other things that I like more, I do think there is some little barrier to entry for me into the franchise compared to something like even something like James Bond, which does have its own degree of schlock, or Star Wars, which same thing. I feel like there's something in Indiana Jones that isn't quite as grabbing to me. I will admit it's mostly a MacGuffin hunt. It's not nearly as character driven as most other franchises, and I don't find the plots to be as interesting as some other, like, James Bond's a good example. That's not character driven either, and that is schlocky, but that environment, that world, that setting is more intriguing to me than Indiana Jones. But I've seen all the movies. I've seen all of them at least twice, except for Dial of Destiny, because that came out not that long ago, and I don't need to see it again because who cares? But I am familiar with this franchise for sure. Now, this game was released with the assumption that it was going to be bad. I think most people were like, "Oh, that's basically vaporware. That's essentially a junk IP game that has no chance." And it ended up doing really well in terms of critical reception, and generally speaking, audiences have liked it as well. So this game ended up being a surprise hit, not necessarily in terms of sales, but for whatever it's worth, Bethesda has claimed they consider the game to be a success. Now, what I thought of the game overall, I would say I consider the game to be good, but not by much. And I ended up having quite a few problems with it. I ended up feeling like they left a lot on the table here. And while I'm not surprised that critics have generally been favorable to this game, because there are some things about it that are very commendable, overall, I feel like there were some pretty obvious errors made when they were putting this game together. So for me, I look at this game and I can say a few things in the positive. It does feel like Indiana Jones, just a little bit bigger in scope because a video game is longer than a movie, right? They can't have you play this game and be done with it in 2 hours the way you are with a movie. So it's longer, but it feels like Indiana Jones. You travel to a few more locations than you would in a movie, but same idea. I think that the game looks beautiful. The character models look great. And Troy Baker, does a pitch-perfect Harrison Ford impression. Although that confuses me. Troy Baker is probably the most expensive voice actor in the world of video games right now. You are paying a premium for Troy Baker. So I gotta ask, what is the point of hiring Troy Baker to voice your main character when all you're gonna have him do is do an impression of Harrison Ford when he was younger? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, right? Because you could get a Harrison Ford impersonator for way cheaper, and you get the same effect. It kind of reminds me of many years ago, they made a live action Yogi Bear movie, and Boo Boo was voiced by Justin Timberlake, but then they pitched his voice up so it doesn't sound like Justin Timberlake. Well, what's the point? Why would you cast Justin Timberlake and then make his voice sound unrecognizable? Just cast anybody. Just cast some random guy on the street, pitch their voice up, and what's the difference? But anyway, I will say Troy Baker does a phenomenal job of playing the role. And going beyond just those more superficial elements to this game, I do think that the melee combat, the puzzles, are really good. I do think that those elements of this game work very well. I do wish that maybe the puzzles were a little bit more integrated with the gameplay in the way that like a God of War puzzle or an Uncharted puzzle is. But I think they tried to capture the spirit of the franchise they were emulating, and they did. It feels like Indiana Jones type puzzles. It feels like Indiana Jones type combat. But with me saying that positive stuff about the combat, I then have to point out my first big problem with this game is that the gunplay is garbage. The gunplay is terrible in this game. I have played PlayStation 1 games like the original Medal of Honor that I thought felt better with the shooting than this game. In this game, it doesn't feel like the hit detection is very good. It feels like you can shoot somebody in the face and they will tank it as long as they're wearing a helmet. Like, I didn't shoot him in the helmet, I shot him in the face. His helmet pops off and he's fine. It feels like the head is invulnerable if they're wearing a helmet. You can unload round after round after round after round into enemies and they barely react. It doesn't feel like you're really shooting at them. It almost feels like laser tag sometimes. And the shooting is just, I think, the main thing that stands out that I don't like in this game. It's very clear to me from playing this game that the developers did not want you to use guns very much. They wanted you to use the melee combat. They wanted you to use melee weapons, which is fine, but that doesn't change the fact that there are guns in the game, and you're going to use them at some point, and the gunplay just doesn't feel good at all to me. Again, I played PS1 games. The original Medal of Honor to me had better, the guns felt better and shooting felt better than in this. And again, they want you to use the melee combat, which, okay, but again, you can't really use melee combat in all situations. Sometimes you're going to be in a situation where there are 15 enemies and there's only one of you, and you have a very low stamina bar in this game. And the melee combat, while good, does take a while to get people down. So you're not going to be able to survive that situation. Of course, that invites stealth, and yes, you are expected to play this game with some degree of stealth, but given the situations you find yourself in as the player, you're still going to get completely overwhelmed if you get into any kind of combat at all, unless you're in a very isolated scenario where it's one or two guys at most. And if even those one or two guys have guns, there's not much you can do. It's almost like Batman Arkham Asylum, because the whole point of that game was Batman cannot fight head on with bad guys with guns. So if you run into a bad guy with a gun, he mows you down instantly. So you have to find other ways to fight him. That was great. This game's kind of trying to do the same thing, but the stealth isn't that good. And it kind of feels like the way they balanced all this stuff out is to make the enemy AI dirt stupid. And that's another criticism of this game. The enemies in this game are dumb. They can look right at you and not see anything. They can watch you shoot one of their friends in the face and kill them, and then run like 10 feet away, and then they just look for you and then give up. Like, there was a part in this game where I had gotten the attention of a big group of enemies, and what I did was I would kill one and then run backwards into a cave and just wait for them to de-aggro for like 90 seconds. I'd go back out, kill another one, come back, wait, go back, kill one, come back, wait, over and over and over again. And they would just let me do it, because when I would aggro them, they would basically just start looking around for me for a minute or two, and then they'd go, oh, I can't find him. I guess he doesn't exist anymore. And it was really just kind of laughable at a certain point, because one thing about the enemies in this game, they are phenomenally accurate shots. If they shoot you, you're probably going down. So the fact that their AI was a disaster at that point, it almost felt like a way to balance out the fact that you have low stamina and can't really fight that well in this game. So they were like, okay, to make up for that, we're going to make the enemies really stupid. But they made them stupid in a way that was really over the top to me. There was one part in this game where I alerted a camp, and then I climbed up a ladder, and these guys didn't know how to climb up the ladder to get after me. So I just got to sit up there until I got bored, or they just gave up. And I can't remember what happened first. But I think you guys see what I'm getting at here. The enemies in this game, I could go back to PlayStation 1 games that had better enemy AI than this. You can go back to games like Resident Evil 4 or Fear 2 that had much better AI than this. Half-Life 2. Not even close. And look, if they had good AI, the game would probably be too hard, but that's why you have to find a way to balance your game out in the right way that doesn't make everything feel stupid. So that stuff definitely got on my nerves. That stuff definitely, it almost made the game kind of funny at points, because it was so easy to kill a couple of guys, run away, and then the remaining enemies just watch you run away like their feet don't work or something. But again, credit where credit's due. The melee combat is good. And you are meant to play a lot of this game with stealth. That's another thing. Like, I don't think the stealth is that good. Like, there's a system where you can sneak up behind an enemy and then do a stealth kill, but the stealth kill doesn't work very well. Your dude starts Indy starts making noise right when he's about to swing and negates the whole point of stealth. So when that stuff breaks down, all you're really left with is a system where the best thing you can do is kill a guy, go hide, kill a guy, go hide, kill a guy, go hide, and depend entirely on the stupidity of the opponent AI. So that wasn't very good. That's the main stuff, I think, in terms of like the gameplay. The game's not bad or anything like that. It was just one of those things where I felt them trying to find a way to justify, okay, Indiana Jones is not a superhero. He's a normal dude. He's in shape, maybe, but that's about it. So we're not going to have him fighting 20 people at once like he's Captain America or Iron Man or John Wick or anything like that. But we want to have a lot of enemies because it's a video game, but we want him to be able to get through the situation without it being impossible. So we'll just make everyone dumb. So those things, those elements, the stealth gameplay not being very good, the gunplay being bad, and the enemy AI being stupid, they make the game playable, but they also make it kind of, I don't know. At a certain point, I definitely checked out a little bit on the gameplay and just was ready for the game to be over, because there are countless games I can play that have similar mechanics that do it better. And maybe this stuff wouldn't bother me as much if the game wasn't in first person, but this is a first person game for the most part. I think that's a mistake too. I think this game should have been a third-person game and tried to ape Uncharted and Tomb Raider as much as possible. And thinking about it, I think that this game is first-person partially because it's trying to distance itself from Uncharted and Tomb Raider. But those games, those franchises are very successful for a reason. Why does Indiana Jones need to be in first person? Indiana Jones isn't known for using his guns a lot. That's why it's called a first-person shooter, right? You shoot a lot. Well, you don't shoot much in this game. Or at least if you do, I think it's a pain in the butt. So why not be third person? You could almost call this game like a first-person adventure game, like Metroid Prime, but the shooting just doesn't feel good. So that's tough. So I would like to see this game re-released with a third-person mod like they did with Resident Evil 8, where you can play the game either way. I think this game would benefit from going in third person. The puzzles, for the most part, were pretty easy for me, and I did play the puzzles on the harder mode. So there wasn't anything in here that I thought was overly complicated. There was one puzzle near the end of the game that kind of bugged me, and I eventually had to look up the solution. But I think if I had more time, I would have been able to figure it out. So the puzzles are fine. I'll say that. The story, to talk about that, because this is an Indiana Jones game, the story is a part of this. It does feel like Indiana Jones, but it doesn't necessarily feel like the best of Indiana Jones, because I was trying to figure out what I didn't love about this story compared to something like Raiders of the Lost Ark. I think the answer is it feels like things kind of come out of nowhere. There is stuff that happens at the end of this game that I'm not going to say in this video for obvious reasons. The start of the game is basically Indiana Jones is working at a college, and then something gets stolen from the college, and he has to track down the thief. That's the, first part of the game. So I won't go any further than that with plot details. But the stuff that comes at the end of the game, it doesn't feel like the rest of the game's story was about that. It just comes up at the end, so there's something to do. Like, you think about Raiders of the Lost Ark, the whole movie is clearly, with the exception of, I guess, the intro scene, the whole movie, besides that opening scene, is about the Ark of the Covenant. The Last Crusade, the whole movie is about Jesus Christ, right? The whole movie is about the life of Jesus Christ and trying to find the Holy Grail. So you have those things very clearly the focus of the film. So in this game, there's stuff that happens that kind of made me feel like, well, they just kind of pulled that out at the end. And I know I don't want to say what it is, but when you get there, you'll probably know what I mean. It obviously, this game obviously borrows pretty heavily from Raiders of the Lost Ark, which I thought was fine. I think that makes sense. Raiders is considered to be the best film in the franchise. So, of course, they would ape from that pretty heavily. And I think it did that fairly well. The game is beautiful, like I said. Using the whip is fun, even though it doesn't work great in combat the way you would hope. There's some real problems with trying to use the whip in combat. There are some inconsistencies with the way in which the whip works, which are definitely frustrating. But I think that's really all there can be said about this game. I know Indiana Jones is supposed to be kind of corny. I know it's supposed to be schlocky. There was some stuff in this game that kind of pushed it for me, kind of like the modern Indiana Jones movies push it, and I don't know if it needs to go that far. Like, you think about, like, Raiders of the Lost Ark. What are the really schlocky scenes in that? You have the scene where Indiana Jones escaping from the boat, and then everyone on the boat starts cheering him on as he's leaving. That's weird, but it's charming. It's kind of funny. There's nothing really I don't think there's a problem there. In something like this, it's, I don't know, a guy in a cutscene randomly pulling out some WWE finisher. And it's probably meant to be goofy, but I don't know if it needs to go that far into it. But that's going to vary based on each person's taste and what they want to get out of this franchise. So I'd give it like an 8 out of 10. It's good, but I feel like it left some stuff on the table. I feel like it could have been better. Wish it wasn't first person. 8 out of 10. All right, see you guys later. More videos coming soon.